Hello and good afternoon. I am Bettina Janssen, Program Officer in the Hamburg office of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, and I welcome you to today's discussion. Today, we want to focus on striking events that took place in Georgia just a couple of weeks ago, when people met on the streets, protested, rioted to prevent their own government from leaving a pro-European path. What exactly happened there, why it happened, and what may come of it, we want to discuss with our two knowledgeable guests, Dorota Dlochi-Soliga and Katrin Banach. They will be further introduced by our moderator, journalist Wolf-Achim Wiegand. You are invited to participate and ask questions through the Q&A function, the Q&A tool. I hope you will all have a good discussion. And Wolf, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bettina. Good day to everyone and hello. Nice to see you all at lunchtime, at least Brussels lunchtime. I know in Georgia the time is a little bit different. We are live here on Zoom, and we are also visible via the Naumann Foundation's channel on YouTube, where the event will be recorded and can be seen later. So the audience is much bigger than we see on our screens. My name is Wolf-Achim Wiegand. I am a German journalist, and I am speaking now from Hamburg. I'm your moderator today. And now let me especially welcome our distinguished guests. Live from Tbilisi is Katrin Banach. You are the head of the Naumann Foundation's office in Georgia, responsible for the whole South Caucasian region. Katrin, you are our eyewitness today because you live in Georgia and know exactly what goes on the spot. And from Brussels is our second guest, and I am happy to have you because there is no better Georgia expert in the whole European Union, I would say. Dorota Dlochi-Soliga, and I hope I do pronounce your name more or less correct. You are the head of the EU External Service Division for South Caucasia, and you are, as Katrin, responsible for a group of very complicated countries, not only Georgia, but also the Republic of Moldova, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. I think I have got them all. Before we get started with our topic, as Bettina has said, a brief technical note: all participants can ask questions. Please post them below at your screen in the Q&A section, not in the chat, but in the Q&A section. I shall try to follow your questions or comments and filter them into our conversation, if that is possible and convenient. What I plan today is threefold. First, let us talk about the current situation in Georgia. What has happened since the demonstrations associated with violence took place? Second, who are the political players in Georgia? And third, an outlook. Will Georgia succeed its ambitions to become an EU or a NATO member? Our topic today is a pro-European uprising in Georgia, and so let us in the beginning go straight to Georgia, to Katrin in Tbilisi. Some weeks ago, we have seen violent protests against a law which the demonstrators saw as pro-Russian. The government finally withdrew the draft of the law. Katrin, meanwhile, what is the current political situation in Georgia?
Thank you, Wolf-Achim, for hosting this talk. You described it correctly and maybe not so correctly. I wouldn't say they were very violent protests. There was not a lot of violence as such coming from the protesters. They were peaceful. The response of the police was maybe a bit or maybe not so bit overdrawn, partly maybe unprofessional, too intense for the situation of a large group of peaceful protests. However, the situation came also into being because the law was tabled in the Parliament for the first reading in a surprising move by the government. And the protests were very spontaneous on the first day. No one was really prepared. It also showed how authentic these protests were. On the second day, when the situation became more tense, people came from all over the country, came by buses, and wanted to show that they are for policy that is pro-European. You mentioned the law was seen as giving a path towards a Russian governance model, and this is the reason is that calling someone a foreign agent here in Georgia is also perceived not only something that is insulting, but it has a connection to the Soviet past here. Calling someone a foreign agent is considered to be a spy, and in the past, spies have been taken away from their families, tortured and killed. So just labeling someone this way is very discrediting. And the law was intended to force all NGOs and media representatives or media outlets who receive more than 20% of foreign funding to register under this label. And this was understood as a clear move away from a pluralistic democratic path, as an attempt to silence civil society, who has been very outspoken and critical of the government sometimes, and as a move towards also the election coming up next year, in which such critical voices are not being appreciated by the governing party.
Katrin, just briefly, was the protest limited to the capital, or does it exist elsewhere in Georgia?
It was taking place here on Rustaveli Avenue, not far away from my office. That's a place where history has been decided in Georgia a couple of times already by large protests. Georgia is not a very large country, so it is possible to come to the capital from many different places in Georgia. However, if the situation would have been prolonged, one wouldn't have known if more protests would have erupted. So it was a good move from the governing party to close the chapter very quickly and take the law away. However, the issue is not away. The issue, and that is also was made very clear by representatives of the government, is really to discredit civil society and opposition. And with the move away from, or with disabling the law, at the same time, very harsh campaign, one can say, and also discrediting of certain organizations, of naming specific individuals, of blaming them of these protests, saying they instigated these protests. This has started since then, or has intensified. It actually had begun before. So when you ask me what's the current situation, it's becoming very hot here, in a sense, for anyone who opposes the government to speak out and not be labeled or targeted as a foreign agent, even if their bill is not there. Organizations are targeted in the media. There are posters hanging around the town with faces, and under them is written, agent. So it's a really a campaign mode of silencing critical voices.
Thanks, Katrin. Let's now go to Dorota. What is the political situation from Brussels' point of view? How does the European Union look at Georgia?
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting me here. Let me first agree with Katrin in terms of the protests. They were peaceful. Protesters came with peaceful intentions, and organizers were trying to keep it as peaceful as possible. Indeed, this attempt to introduce the law on foreign agent was an important, I think, turning point for the society in Georgia, because it's important to underline that in Georgia, consequently, over many years, last 30 years, we have a huge majority of population supporting pro-European path. And it is not dependent on which government is in power. This was under previous governments. This is under current government. The EU path is also enshrined in Georgian constitution. And it was extremely important for us also in Brussels to see how much society is attached to this European line. And when they see a threat to European future of Georgia, they are ready to come to the streets in big numbers. And if you looked at the protesters, they were really representing all parts, all walks of life in Georgia, from high school students who saw it as a way to take away their future, which they see only in the EU, to older people remembering Soviet times and repressions during Soviet times. This law was extremely unfortunate. The draft law was extremely unfortunate. I know that there were attempts to show it that this is similar to solutions in US or in Europe. It's not true, because similar solutions in US and Europe target lobbying directly on behalf of foreign governments. So for lobbying companies paid to lobby on behalf of foreign governments, while here you would have called foreign agent an NGO in some region of Georgia that receives from Norway money for schooling the children, or providing English classes to the children. They would be foreign agents, because more than 20% of the income would be coming from the third country. So that's why we reacted very strongly on this. Normally maybe stronger than we do. Immediately during the protests, High Rep Borrell clearly said that this law is not in line with EU values and it's not compatible with European future of Georgia.
Okay, we come back to that in a moment. Katrin, just let us know, who are these protesters? One has to mention that the Georgian government is a democratically elected one and has a majority in parliament. So the protesters are a parliamentarian minority, or do they represent something bigger?
As Dorota already said, they represent a vast group of different people from the society. At the same time, also a lot of students were seen on the streets. Those ones, young people who fear for their future, they are the ones who are also leaving Georgia right now. A lot of them, unfortunately, because they don't see a future, but those ones who care for their country came out. I also met families there. I didn't stay very long, but I took a quick walk by, and because we're not allowed to be there. But the reason why the Georgian government now targets university, is that they say that this was organized by certain organizations affiliated to universities. So they claim it's just university protests, students' protests. And they have even exchanged the Minister of Education with a line, along with some comments that that's a very honorable name, but it wasn't coming from me. Yeah. And so the Minister of Education now there was a new one installed with the expectation that such protests are not happening again, that there is pressure exerted on students. There are irregular visits of police and student storms. There's a very high pressure on a private university now, which is combined with an existential threat of a court case probably put to that university. So the government is doing everything to avoid such a situation again. I also heard an MP saying, MP of the governing party, that for exactly this reason such a law is needed, that because they basically blame foreign funding for instigating those protests, which of course discredits the protests as unauthentic and, you know, just by organized by someone foreign, nothing Georgian.
Okay. Now, Dorota, you have also already mentioned that the membership within the European Union is enshrined in Georgia's constitution. Now, I have a question which might be difficult for a diplomat to answer, but I ask this question. Do you have the feeling that the actual government in Georgia really lives to this demand of the constitution?
I think that, you know, having also elections in 2024, no government can ignore also the population being very much pro-European. And there has been over the years a lot of things done in order to get into the direction of the EU. But now it's also important that the government shows not only technical alignment with the EU legislation, but what member states will be looking at is where Georgia stands in terms of values, where Georgia stands in terms of human rights, where Georgia stands on the key issues which are related to a membership in the club, which has certain rules.
Yeah.
And this is something that the government will have to take into account, how they implement the European path, because indeed Georgia did very well in terms of alignment on different parts of legislation coming from association agreement and so on. Georgia has extremely capable administration, which is able to deliver on many issues.
Yeah.
But the main issues are at the political will level. So this will be something that our member states will be looking at when deciding on the candidate status, and they are doing this, as you know, unanimously, with 27 having to agree on another member of the club getting closer.
Now the European Union has recently granted the candidate status to nations like Ukraine and Moldova, but not to Georgia. Could you explain us why is that?
First of all, we member states decided to grant European perspective to Georgia, which is already a huge step. If you asked me 1 year ago if Georgia had European perspective or Moldova or Ukraine would be candidate status, I would not show much of political acumen, because I would tell you no, at least in January 2022. But I don't think any of us would think about such a development. The response why it happened is in the Commission opinion and in the number of priorities that we requested both Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia to address. But it's not insurmountable, I would say. It's still possible. I think it's very much possible for Georgia to diminish this gap between Ukraine and Moldova. What does not help is definitely that we are partially in electoral campaign in Georgia. It does not help to build the coalition of willing on everybody's side. The electoral campaigns in Georgia are sometimes more harsh than in other places because they are seen as existential, as there's not much of the experience of democratic change of power. It means always much tougher, much more polarized. The campaigns are always like this, so it makes it difficult, this perspective of elections in 2024. But it's still possible.
As far as I know, the EU has given 12 recommendations which Georgia is supposed to fulfill in order to obtain EU candidate status. What exactly, what would you say, what exactly does Georgia have to do from the perspective of the European Union to obtain candidate status? What is the most important Georgia has to do?
Of course, all 12 are equally important, and there is some progress on some of those steps. But the part, and the most important, arguably, is justice system reform. But it's more than this, I would say. It's also giving these assurances and understanding to the member states that it's country that shares the values, that is on the same side in as far as the war, Russian war against Ukraine is concerned, and really has the political will to follow up on the steps. But let me also say that, there's, and I think I've said this recently also in another talk, there's an important work to be done on the EU side too. We have to show that enlargement process is credible, because and now, not saying as as diplomat, but from my Polish background, when we were joining the EU, it was clear that if we the process was clear. There were so many countries waiting for movement on the process in Western Balkans at the time. We were the only enlargement countries. Previous enlargements were easy with Finland, Austria, and so on. So we were following the same steps. So now it's also very much important that we will be on the EU side, showing that this makes sense, because then there is, and I think we are on the EU side, clear that we want this path. Things are moving very quickly. So there is a historical opening for the three countries. They have to work on this and believe us that this is, but with the past of previous years, it might be difficult.
Catherine, to you as the one of us who lives on the spot, why is the European Union so popular in Georgia? I have read that 80% of Georgians are in favor of joining the EU. What makes it so attractive for Georgians? I mean, the geographic neighbor Russia could also be an option, I say provocatively.
Yeah, exactly. That makes it very attractive to join the EU and not go back into a sphere of influence from Russia. I think the EU stands for peace, security, stability, prosperity, everything that we all want, and which is also connected to the values that Dorota mentioned. And exactly the choice between Russia, which is so close by, and which has, which is in Tbilisi, actually has only 40 kilometers away, troops stationed in one of the breakaway region, the so-called occupied region of South Ossetia. So the danger of Russia exerting more influence with a policy or governance model which is authoritarian, corrupt, non-inclusive, and at the end exerts violence on its own citizen in a grave manner, which I don't need to describe. This model is now again made, by the Russian aggressive war on Ukraine, made very clear here. But Georgians say, we were aware of this much earlier by the Russian aggressions 2008 already. It was, the danger of Russian imperialism was already demonstrated, and they really do never want to go back into that imperium. And for them, the way out is a perspective towards the West here. Now I had to reorient myself towards the West, not only because it's a current situation, dangerous geopolitical situations surrounded by large powers who want to increase their dominance in the region, but it also has a long history or tradition of history where their cultural ties, their language ties, Georgians have been looking west and traveling west since many centuries, even as when they were under Russian influence and power. And so this aspiration has a long tradition. Okay. And Dorota, you mentioned the clear position regarding Russia. I think that is also a weak spot of the government here. I think pro-European also needs a clear message. That means a clear signal: we are not dealing with, working with, or understanding Russian politics here. So a clear line where we stand in this conflict, and that has also not been voiced by the current government, which is also been a point of disappointment or reason for disappointment by many people here, because of the shared experience of Russian aggression into the territories also of Georgia. There's a very strong sentiment amongst the population here with the Ukrainian people.
Understandable. I mean, on the other hand, there seem to be some people in Georgia who are still orientated to Russia, maybe a minority. Maybe you could elaborate about how big they are. I mean, Georgia has been part of the Soviet Union. Stalin is a son of Georgia. Once again asked, would it not be logical that Georgians also would have some kind of cultural affinity towards Russia, the big neighbor? What about those who see Russia still as a I would not say an ally, but there seem to be people even in Georgia who are friendly with Russia.
Of course, yes, absolutely. And people have learned and spoken Russian for a long time. Generally, people are very open to strangers. They're very hospitable. They so even though there is a sense of unease and maybe fear with a lot of Russians also coming in here, no one is being beaten up on the street here. You know, people are friendly with each other, and of course, that also has something to do with those long ties between those countries. That at the same time, this also allows Russia to exert a lot of influence here through Russian-speaking media channels filled with propaganda. It also allows to connect to a narrative that has this colonial touch, and it's here full of the story that how Russia sees the world. So this is it makes the country vulnerable, and many people say so and fear so that a lot of Russian influence here, also Russian people coming here, could also be an argument for Putin to invade Georgia at one point, because with the argument that he has to look after his Russian citizens. This is unlikely to happen. However, there is this fear, and that's why people turn away from using Russian language, for example. And they do turn away from being open and friendly towards Russian, because they are not sure who is coming here, in which interests they are working, and they are fearful of the large package that they bring here with them. Not only the money, actually the money has helped the economy here a lot. It has spurred more or helped that there was more than 10% growth here. But generally, people are anxious about too large Russian influence here.
Yeah, Dorota, is the EU not afraid that Georgia turns into a second Ukraine? I speak as an outsider. I see parallels to the ongoing 214 on the Maidan in Kiev. It all began also with EU flags, crowds.
No, I think this is completely different situation, and I would not go into this this parallel. I think this is different government, the different situation that we are. Also internal situation in Georgia, because just coming back to Russians in Georgia, and of course, Catherine is on the ground and things are changing, but I still believe that this is the least friendly country to Russia in the region, definitely. I don't think that anybody openly in politics could say that they would like to have alliance with Russia, or they would like to follow this path. What is the case, though, that, you know, for the past, Georgia is vulnerable in particular to manipulation of information, foreign information manipulation, interference, because, but it's not used explicitly as Russia, but some notions which are common maybe for or seen as common for orthodoxy values, traditional values, you know, anti-LGBT, EU is about LGBT only, and so on and so on, are easily disseminated. There is this part of more traditional conservative society who is susceptible to this set of Russian narratives. But I wouldn't say that this country can touch wood, change totally the orientation. The society over those 30 years, it's really freedom-minded. It's very much, you know, civil society is grassroots, apart from those organizations that are also targeted by some negative narratives. There's really lots of small organizations, people who are very active at the local level, and so on, which makes them immune to some influences. On Maidan, no, I don't think we are seeing the Maidan. We don't have also groups who could be manipulated this way in some part of Georgia that would undermine the territorial integrity further. Of course, we have Abkhazia and South Ossetia. This is quite clear, but the TBDC does not have currently control. And they are also anxious with everything what is happening, clearly. And they are afraid, as many Georgians might be afraid of war. War experience is fresh, it's painful, but also population living in those regions would be afraid of any kind of military developments.
Okay, so let's forget this parallel. Catherine, let's change the perspective. Only days ago, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has shown up in Tbilisi. She did not only speak with the government, but she also contacted opposition NGOs, and she went to the line where Russia controls part of the Georgia territory. How was Baerbock's visit seen and commentated in Georgia?
Positive, because she used clear words. She gave a clear message, very diplomatically phrased. And I think that was what people here were longing for. And I think that is something that the EU can also still improve. Now the stronger move when it came to this law was absolutely perfect. That was really good. But earlier, when the 12 points were communicated, some of them were so vaguely formulated that immediately here on the ground, a political battle for their interpretation started, and the governing party has twisted their interpretation in a way that a lot of people really highly contest. So clearer messages, for example, that there is no democracy without civil society, and there is, you know, what does it mean, de-oligarchization? That was a main battleground here question.
About that in a moment.
that is required. And Baerbock gave such messages, which was good. It was good she visited here. It was great she visited the line of occupation, because it also showed a sign of that the German foreign policy wants Georgia to or sees Georgia as part of those countries where Russia tries to exert more influence, and where this is also from our perspective an important reason why we want to see Georgia in the EU, and why we want to step up our efforts here to bring Georgia closer to us. And yeah, however, at the same time, there wasn't much media attention on her visit here, because she came a bit by surprise. No one was really informed about it before, just a day before that, and hence, yeah, the messages weren't distributed as widely as it maybe could have been.
So very spontaneous. Dorota, are visits like Annalena Baerbock's helpful? Is that what EU governments should do, show up in presence? Or would you, in your personal opinion, prefer a quieter approach?
As EU diplomat, I cannot really comment on member states' activities in the third countries, but on this particular mission, I had also my managing director joining at the request of German Foreign Ministry the mission. So there was European element embedded in the mission, and I think it worked very well. You know, for us, Georgia is important. South Caucasus is important, and Georgian people are important. So as much as I believe always, as a diplomat, I always believe in more engagement than less engagement, more talking, more trying to convince.
Another question to the diplomat, will Josep Borrell visit Georgia soon?
We would like him to visit the region in general, because he hasn't been under his mandate yet, but his calendar is extremely challenging. So from my small geographic corner, I'm pushing for it, but the calendar is still challenging.
Okay, let's come back to Georgia, leave the Brussels stage, so to say. Let's come back to the Georgian government. The Prime Minister Irakli Gharibaschwili represents the successful Dream Party. To Katrin, this question is, what kind of man is Gharibaschwili, and what kind of party does he represent?
I have not met him yet, so.
I mean, politically, what kind of person?
Yeah, well, let's maybe quote the president of Georgia in an interview she gave last week, where she said she doesn't know where the center of power really lies here. She would like to meet Ivanishvili, but she doesn't, or she can't. So she was hinting that the center of power actually lies not with the prime minister, but with the founder of the party, Bidzina Ivanishvili, who's a billionaire who made his fortune in the 90s in Russia, and his ties to Russia are in question because of this background. And nowhere there is much evidence of him leaving, influencing the day-to-day business of the government. However, there are lots of indications that he does. And one of that is that he picked his former assistant as a prime minister. And the other indication is that, but this is now, reading tea leaves, how could a law on foreign agent be taken away from the parliamentary process within a night, So there are certain decisions made very quickly, many decisions not made, and so we suspect that he is a very powerful figure behind the government, and that discredits, of course, the government. that makes it really difficult to deal with it, because we might not be dealing with the real person in power if we talk to the people in positions.
Yeah, Katrin, you have already mentioned Ivanishvili, this heavily wealthy businessman, in fact, an oligarch. Question to Dorota. Some say the reason why Georgia has not received the EU candidacy status is because of Ivanishvili. Is this true?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so my question would be, what should Georgia do to retain his influence?
Again, I'm not Georgian, and I would prefer not to comment whether there is influence or not, because we are dealing with the Georgian government, with Georgian Prime Minister, with Georgian President. So these are our counterparts. I cannot say or assess where Mr. Ivanishvili as the creator of Georgian Dream is currently. He was our counterpart when he was Prime Minister, during his Prime Ministership. And we were meeting him also when he was active in politics as Georgian Dream head of the party. But I cannot assess whether he has still influence, what kind of influence is this, and when he uses it, if he has it.
A diplomatic answer. Katrin, in 2024, next year, the Georgian parliament will be newly elected. Have recent events already had an impact on this? Can one already guess if the ruling party will be victorious, or is there any opposition figure inside who could organize new majorities?
Yes, you have asked me about the party before. I know the party is very professionally run. If you have money, you can hire really excellent opinion poll makers and create also professional party machinery, so that increases the chance of getting re-elected. Then there are also questions in the election process, and one of our partners is, for example, doing a study on looking at, seemingly minor details, how the election are organized, but maybe they are loopholes for exerting some influence. So it's good to eradicate these loopholes to make sure that the process is even more transparent and valid. So with a functioning party machinery, with the message of stability, and that's also the message that the government now gives out. We don't want protests like this. We are a party for stability, and we are a party for peace. And they label the opposition party as those ones who want to drag Georgia into the war with Russia. So with these messages, also they can convince voters, and particularly also in rural regions where they also have most of the mandates in local governance, and have a strong network amongst anyone who's paid getting a salary from the government.
Okay. We are quickly running to the end. I'm really astonished the time is running, but we have to mention two more figures in Georgian politics. One is the role of President Salome Surabischwili, a very colorful figure who once was a French citizen and even worked for the French Foreign Ministry. This president openly opposes the government and planned to veto the controversial foreign agents law. Does Mrs. Surabischwili have any influence? I think Katrin should answer that.
as the president, of course, she has the influence to convince people. She can veto laws, but they can be, again, just in a second reading with a simple majority, go through Parliament. So when it comes to specific laws, her influence is limited. There's also been an increasing conflict between her and the government over the past months over certain positions, particularly when it comes to sensitive issues where Georgia would position itself more according to Western standards or less. So she has been raising her voice there quite openly, and as I said, in a way, as last week was a point which has been a climax in that she has been a difficult factor for the governing party because she has been so openly critical of the policies.
Well, because before I mention the second interesting name in Georgia, I have a question in the chat by Gebhard Reul to Dorota. He asks, what happens if the EU decides at the end of the year that the 12 conditions are not met? Will Georgia's path to the EU then be closed for the foreseeable future?
No, I don't think so. And this is definitely, I don't know what in 8 months member states will decide. 8 months in the current world seems to be eternity almost in terms of decisions, and OCO will be in December based on the Commission reporting coming in end of October, beginning of November. No, it's as for other countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina, member states were discussing the candidate status in consecutive years, and they came with candidate status only this year. So definitely it does not close the way. So it can be both ways. It can be candidate status. It can be, again, still European perspective where their work is needed. But it's not now or never. And I think this is also an important message to the society in Georgia. Whatever happens, it's not that you are refused the EU or the EU does not want you and it's all gone. No.
Okay. There's another question. I don't know exactly who would like to answer, but you can choose. The question is one sentence. Do you see an opportunity for Georgia as a country that has good relations with both the EU and Russia? Who would like to answer that?
Well, I think that's what the current government tries to do. And Russia has also applauded the government for exactly this policy. And I think that's not the way to go ahead for Georgia. And we see that the best example, unfortunately, it was the foreign agent law, that if there are initiatives by the Georgian government who are applauded by Russia, it's exactly the contrary reaction from the EU.
I don't think that you can be a member of the EU currently and trying to be a friendly country to the aggressor. We have very strong and clear policy on Russian war against Ukraine, which is illegal, unjustified, and whatever you want as an objective. If you want to move in the stated objective, there's no such possibility.
As long as Russia does not end the war, there will be difficulties. I understand that. I mentioned also that we have to mention a second prominent Georgian, and no talk about Georgia can be done without mentioning him. He is controversial and prominent. That's ex-President Michail Saakaschwili. You might have guessed that. Let us take aside that he turned from a great liberal reformer to a ruler who himself provoked massive protests, and that he had also put down demonstrations with violence. The fact is that he sits in prison now since 2021 and is accused of abuse of power, and Saakaschwili has begun a hunger strike and is seriously ill. Dorota, what role does Saakaschwili play in your scenarios for Georgia? Does he play a role at all?
I think I owe it to our Georgian friends that we are in close contact about Saakaschwili to correct some things. He's not in prison. He's imprisoned, but not in prison. He's in private clinic under medical support clinic chosen by his lawyers and his family, as I understand. And he's not only accused, he's convicted by the court for certain things, and there are still ongoing cases against him. So it's important difference of a legal status be his physical presence where he is. We see this situation as unfortunate, especially, and we are concerned about his health. This is clear. I don't think that anyone would like to see Mr. Saakaschwili health deteriorating further, and we are offering to Georgia all help if they need this in terms of providing him with healthcare. And we are ready to talk with Georgians on any solutions to his case. But we also accepted this as the court decision, that he was offered already some solutions being in the clinic, which probably most of the Georgian prisoners do not see. But this may be an irritant, less so probably for the relationship with the EU, more with some member states who feel dearly about ex-President Saakaschwili, and this is to some extent unnecessary irritant. Also, just let's not forget that Mr. Saakaschwili crossed the border illegally. So this is very complex and difficult case for us. I would finish here.
Thank you. Well, we come to the end of this talk, but 2 or 3 questions are still open. Let us have an outlook, what will happen in the next future. Katrin, what do you think? What's next for Georgia?
Oh, if I would have the magical glass and could look in the future. I think the civil
at the Naumann Foundation.
No. So Georgian civil societies, Georgian citizens have proven that they are resilient, that they can voice their in which direction their country should go. That keeps me hopeful. One of my colleagues said, I told you, when it's coming to the edge, Georgians will be on the street and let them know where we're going. At the same time, I mentioned those campaigns currently ongoing. I mentioned young people leaving to Europe because they don't see any future here. There are many concerning developments which don't make me feel happy and that hopeful. Maybe we leave it like that. It's all up on the political actors to really get their acts together in a sense and make this happen and move into the right direction, I think.
Thank you.
And it's a good sign that actually that the government took it off, and I hope it will equally respond to other concerns raised now. Yeah.
Okay, last question to Dorota. How can the European Union help the Republic of Georgia not to fall further into Russia's sphere of influence?
how we can help further. I think by continuing doing what we do, supporting the government on the reforms, on helping them to implement the right reforms and to continue on the right path, sending a strong signal to civil society that we are supportive of them, that we stand with values they are behind, and to increase resilience of Georgian society to the Russian influence, meaning disinformation, hybrid actions, and so on. So basically working with whole society across, and giving them also quite clear roadmap and future on the clear European path, I would say, if conditions at each stage of this path are being met by Georgia.
Okay, I can add a comment from the chat. Katie Soloshvili, he obviously is from Georgia. He says
she. That is she.
She, okay, sorry, I'm not so familiar with the names in Georgia. Thanks for clarification. She says it is very hard to change the government under weak opposition. Only people's will is never enough. So I let that with you. Dorota and Katrin, thank you very much for your exhaustive answers. We have reached the end of our talk, and I don't see further questions from the audience. Let me say that you both have enriched our lunchtime meeting very much. I think that I am not wrong if I express the wish of all today's participants that the people of Georgia stay safe and get the future they dream of. Your work on this path, Dorota and Katrin, is difficult and complicated. In this respect, I say goodbye to you with gratitude and wish you every success also. Also, thank you to all of you, the participants. Thanks for watching, for hearing, and also for thinking. My thanks goes also to the Naumann Foundation here in Hamburg for providing the platform. And thanks also to the European Liberals of ALDE individual members who cooperated in making this event possible. Have all a good Wednesday wherever you are, and also everybody stay safe. Bye-bye, auf Wiedersehen, do widzenia. Bye-bye.
Do widzenia.